Welcome year 3 to the final day of literacy using the story The Lion and the Unicorn. You're going to get 2 videos today so that I can keep the file sizes smaller. One where I finish the story off, and the second one, which you must watch as well, not just finish the story, is where he introduced and explain the writing task. If you remember in the story so far, Lenny is an evacuee, he's had to leave London, and he's just started school and nobody was really playing with him and he was feeling quite left out. It's been quite hard being an evacuee, I should imagine. So let's finish the story and see how it ends. On Saturday night, the evacuees had a bath and Nanny inspected their heads for nicks. The bath was huge and had iron feet with claws like a lion. They were only allowed 4 inches of hot water in it. It was rationed like almost everything else. And by the time it was Lenny's turn, it wasn't even hot anymore. Joyce was Nanny's favourite. Nanny curled her hair for her and pressed her hair ribbons for church on Sunday. Joyce put on a special voice when she talked to grown-ups, but when the evacuees were on their own, she was sharp-tongued and treacherous. Lenny spent a lot of time wandering alone in the gardens when no one bothered him. One afternoon, when he pushed open the door of the walled garden, he found somebody else there. A young man with one leg was sitting on one of the stone benches. He was wearing an old tweed jacket with patched elbows. His empty trouser leg was pinned up, and his crutches were propped neatly against the bench beside him. Let's see that man on illustration. That way. Hello there, said the man. It's all right, I do live here. I was just trying to do a bit of weeding. Are you Bill Penny's helper? Lenny asked him. Sort of, said the man. I used to shoot rabbits and pigeons when I got into his vegetable garden, but I don't anymore. This is one of my favourite places. Lenny hovered by the gate, not sure what to say next. My name's Mick, the man continued. Don't let me having one leg bother you. How did you lose it? Lenny wanted to know. I left it on a beach in France, the man told him, but I'll be getting a new one soon. Will it be wooden? No, like metal, I think, with joints. There was a friendly silence, and then Lenny remembered he was not to talk to strangers. He was not sure whether, as this man lived here, he counted as a stranger or not, but he thought he'd better be on the safe side. I've got to go now, he said. Mick just waved. There's the view inside the house. And then he's looking at the very big picture on the wall. Somebody in army uniform. On wet days, Lenny sometimes followed Nellie about the house and they chatted while she dusted and polished. In the great hall there was a suit of armour, swords hanging on the walls and pictures of battle scenes with soldiers in red coats. There was one full-length portrait of a very grand officer in splendid uniform. That's Lady Debassie's grandfather, said Nellie. They've got a lot of soldiers in the family. Lady Debassie's husband was killed fighting in the First World War, and her son's been a Sons of War hero. He's got medals and all. My dad's in the army, Lenny told her. I'm joining up myself soon, said Nellie. The Women's Land Army. Lenny longed for Mom to come, but she wrote to say that she would not visit until he'd settled down. There they are, having tea. She was working in a fireman's canteen. She was not a good writer and her letters were short, but she saved up her sweet ration and sent Lenny a bar of chocolate now and then. Lenny saw Mick about the place sometimes, helping Bill Penny or Lady Debass, but he never came into the kitchen for his meals. There's something been killing rabbits in my vegetable garden, said Bill one afternoon when he was sipping his tea. Not that I mind, he had. I'm quite glad of it. A fox, suggested Mrs. B. No, it's never a fox, more like a big cat. It's got some pigeons too. It'll be one of those wild cats that's living in the barn, said Mrs. B. Very fierce they are. Or perhaps a lion escaped from the zoo, said Joyce shyly, looking sideways at Lenny. Lions kill people. They wait in the dark and spring out at you and tear your stomach out. Lenny tucked up in his bed. Oh, sorry, he's getting ready for bed. He tucked up in that one. That night, long after the others had gone to sleep, Lenny lay awake, listening to the night noises outside. Far away in the dark, he thought he heard a growling. purring sound, and then a shriek of an animal in pain. He got up and peeped through the windows. Was there something prowling about? A black shadow moving alongside the hedge. He hurried back into bed and pulled the blankets over his head. There's Lenny, some of the other boys. They're not looking too friendly. Lenny thought about Mum and Dad a lot, hoping and hoping they were safe, and he longed to see them again. At school, things had got a lot worse. The boys had started to shout at him and make fun of his name. Lenny Levi's done a wee-wee, they jeered. Wets his bed, doesn't he? Then he turned hot with anger and shame. It was true, though, about the bed. It was only sometimes, and he didn't think anyone at school knew about it. He guessed that Joyce must have told them. Nanny was grim-faced in the mornings when she had to deal with all the wet sheets, but Nelly found out and came to Lenny's rescue. You can beat this, Lenny, she told him. Everybody does in the end. And she smuggled some spare bedclothes into the attic so that Lenny could put them on before Nanny came in the morning. She whisked away the wet sheets and washed them herself, and she lent Lenny her big alarm clock. Lenny set it twice the night, and it went off with a great clang. The girls never woke up, and then the bedwetting got better. But the boys at school went on teasing. There's Lenny chatting to Mick again in the garden. One afternoon, Mick came across Lenny sitting hunched on a bench in the walled garden and politely failed to notice his red-rimmed eyes. Homesick, he said. At first, Lenny was too upset to answer, and then he blurted out all about what the boys at school had said. It's not even true anymore, well, hardly at all, but I don't suppose they'll ever stop saying it. I used to make the bed when I was your age, Mick told him. It was when they sent me away to boarding school. Have you done something wrong? Asked Lenny. No, they thought it would do me good, said Mick. My father went there. It was awful. I got teased all the time. Then it started again when I was in hospital after. And he looked down at where his leg had been. But you were grown up then, said Lenny, amazed. Yes, and I cried a lot too, but I got through it somehow. So will you, or my name's not Mick Devass. There was a long silence. Lenny stared at Mick. You're the war hero, he said at last. You've got medals for bravery. Nellie told me. I was frightened all the time in the fighting, said Mick, but I suppose you can't be brave if you're not frightened in the first place. My father was really brave, a fine officer. I'm only a private. My dad's a private, said Lenny proudly. He's fighting the Germans, like you did. I've got his badge. I never wanted to fight the Germans or anyone else, Mick told him. It's cruelty, bullying and oppression we're actually fighting against. And he wasn't quite sure what this meant, but he got the general idea. I used to come here to this garden to see the unicorn when I was a boy in school holidays, said Mick. I used to long to be brave and manly and all the things they wanted me to be. There were the different kinds of courage, and I'll tell you one thing, the boys who say those things to you haven't got much. None at all, in fact. Later, when he was alone, Lenny thought a lot about what Mick had said. And gradually the bedwetting stopped altogether. Knowing a real war hero who had had the same problem helped. He even forgot about the prowling lions. But then something happened which was much worse. What could be much worse? Being an evacuee and away in a strange place. Mum's weekly letters stopped coming. Every morning, Lenny waited anxiously by the gates for the postman to arrive, but there was nothing for him. He told nobody how worried he was, but he started to have bad dreams about searching for Mum and running, and lions leaping out at him, pinning him down with their terrible teeth and claws. The bedwetting started again, and in the end, everything was just too terrible to be borne. One night, Lenny waited until the girls were asleep. You can see what he's doing. He had his suitcase ready and packed, put his precious badge in his pocket, and crept downstairs to the back kitchen. It was difficult to unbolt the back door without making a noise, but he managed it, standing on a chair. He was running away. He had to get back to London. Running away. The planned not to go by the main drive which went round front of the house in case he was seen. Instead, he would cut through the gardens into the orchard, through a hole in the hedge, and across the field to the road. There was a bright moon. Lenny's sharp shadow tracked him nimbly along the silent paths. In the vegetable garden, he scampered past the raspberry beds and rows of stacked up rubber beans where anyone or anything could be hiding. When he reached the orchard, he broke into a run, weaving from one tree trunk to another, crouching low over his suitcase. When he reached the hedge, he stopped short. He thought he heard something moving stealthily and carefully through the grass on the other side. He listened. The whole night seemed to be breathing, purring and growling. He was sure something was coming through the hole in the hedge. Then he did not stop to find out what it was. He dropped his suitcase and ran. Now the dark, many-chimneyed shape of the house seemed to be flying swiftly against the moon. Too far away to run now, but he ran all the same, wildly, until he was heaving for breath. Now he was on the path by the summer house. He saw the door to the walled garden. He pushed it open, fell inside, and slammed it shut behind him. Lenny was crying now, but he felt safe. The garden was completely quiet. The rose bush was frozen in the moonlight, and underneath in its dense shadow something glowed softly, and it moved gently. Lenny wasn't frightened, and he went towards it, and at that moment he saw the unicorn. It was alive, glimmering under the rose bush, sitting on its haunches with its one spiralling horn and its long white silky mane. It turned its beautiful neck and looked at him. Lenny knelt down. He laid his head between its hooves with his face in the grass. He was very tired. Almost at once he fell as though from a great height into a deep sleep. He woke with the hot sun on his neck. It was morning and the unicorn had gone. The statue was in its usual place, watching over the garden. Lenny got up and looked around. He knew that something had changed inside him. It seemed now that it was his own night fears which had been chasing him. He went out of the garden, closing the door softly behind him, and began to walk back to the house. The lion and the unicorn were back inside Lenny's head and on his badge. But one important thing was real, and that was what the unicorn stood for. Different kinds of courage, Mick had said. Now, after last night, Lenny thought he really knew what he meant. Perhaps with his new unicorn courage, he would try to stick things out for a bit and see if they got better. Anyway, he didn't seem to care much for what Joyce and the rest of them said or did anymore. They were only a load of mean, mangy old cats after all. Lenny came to where the garden left the back drive. As he turned the bend, he saw a figure coming towards the house from the opposite direction. A smallish person in a brown coat. A familiar walk. There was a good distance between them. Lenny quickened his pace, and then he broke into a run. And now, as he got closer, the outline of that person was blurred with tears. Who do you think it might be? Lenny tore the last few yards. "Mom, oh Mom," he shouted, and he threw himself into her arms. "Didn't you get my letter?" said Mum after a while. "We've been bombed out, a direct hit. The whole house has gone. Luckily, I was working at the canteen that night." "I never got no letter," sobbed Lenny. "The letterbox must have got it," said Mum. "I was running away," Lenny tried to tell her, but then his voice choked. It was too difficult to explain. "It's lucky you didn't," said Mum, "or we might have missed each other. You're a brave boy, Lenny. A proper hero you are. After you left, it seemed like even bombs would have been better than us being separated. But now I've come to take you away. We're going to your Auntie Rachel's in Wales. It's by the sea, Lenny. And guess what? Your dad's coming home on some leave. You'd better go and tell them." Then he felt in his pocket to check that his badge was safe. So he, Lenny Levi, was brave after all. Knew that didn't mean he would never be scared again, but at that moment he felt he could face anything. Jaunty now and hand in hand with his mom, he walked back towards the house. And that was the end of the story. There's a nice illustration inside the back cover, which we're going to look at in the next lesson. I hope from reading that you get an idea a little bit about the setting of World War II and quite how hard it might have been for me back with. A lot of the World War II work we're going to do over the next few weeks are thinking about what it would be like in the war for a child, because that might make a bit more sense to you with the topic. So I wonder if you would have liked to be sent away. We'll come back to that idea of that in some future learning. Remember to watch the second video where I'm going to introduce the literacy task.